Welcome to Mental Survival, the channel where we talk about the psychological aspects of prepping and survivalism. My name is Cliff Hamrick, and this week I want to discuss more about personality types, particularly introverts and extroverts. This is a concept that was developed by Carl Jung, I believe some back in the 1920s or so. And introverts particularly are not very well, I don't want to say they're not well understood, but there's a lot of misconceptions out there about this, and so I think but it's a very important aspect of our personality, so I think it's one that's worth a whole video on its own. If you've taken the MBTI test off of the 16 Personalities website, and I'll put the link in the description if you haven't already, but when you do it, you'll notice that there are 4 letters, and each one of those little 4-letter codes starts with an I or an E. The I stands for introvert, and the E stands for extrovert. And in reality, introversion and extroversion exist on a spectrum. You can be very introverted or very extroverted, or somewhere in between, and not really much of either one. Some people call those ambiverts. But for the purposes of the test and the purposes of today's discussion, I'm going to talk mainly about the two extremes, the two categories, because most people do tend to fall in one or the other. So the first thing to talk about is that this introversion extroversion is somewhat hardwired in our brain. We can actually see the neural pathways that are different in introverts and extroverts. And what that means is that if you are one, you're probably just going to stay that way. And I work with a lot of introverts who don't want to be introverts. I was that way myself. I rank at about 95% introverted, and I didn't like it. Hard to relate to people. They don't always understand them. Difficulties and that sort of thing. And so I always just wanted to be an extrovert, just come out and just be more extroverted. And it was always hard, and it seemed impossible, and I just felt weird. And having studied it more, I discovered that I'm really trying to, jam a square peg into a round hole. It's just not going to work. I'm an introvert. That's how it is. I also had just a lot of misconceptions about these sort of things and talked down about myself. A really good resource, if you want to read more about this, is this book called Quiet. And it is by Susan Cain. I'll put a link to the Amazon page as well if you want to read it. But she goes really in depth about the neurology of introversion, extroversion, and she's mainly talking about introverts. And I'm going to mainly talk about introverts today as well, because as she discusses, and I agree, modern American life rewards extroverts. We like extroverts. Extroverts are around lots of people. They make us feel good about ourselves and about them and everything else. They work well as a team, so they work well in group settings. They're much more likely to get hired. They're much more likely to get promoted. It's not to say that it's all just wine and roses for extroverts, but introverts tend to have a lot more stigmas placed upon them than extroverts. Extroverts are kind of seen as like the gold standard of how people should be, and introverts are broken. And for a long time, that is kind of how we thought of them, even in counseling circles. It's only more recently that, probably past 20, maybe 30 years, maybe not even that long, that we've actually started to see introverts as just a different way of being, and there's nothing really wrong with it. They're not mentally ill. They're just introverts. So to define our terms, the way to determine, and this is a very broad term, generalization, but generally speaking, the way to tell if you're an introvert and extrovert is to sort of see, how do you recharge your batteries? Do you like being around people, or do you like being alone? Do you find being around people draining, or do you find it energizing? If you're an extrovert, being around people will be energizing. You will like being around people. You'll feel better about yourself. You'll feel more secure in the world. You will feel anxious if you're alone, or you'll feel just depressed and down, that sort of thing. So extroverts like being around people. Introverts like being alone. Now, that's not to say that Introverts hate people. They're not antisocial. They're not misanthropes. But being around a lot of people, a lot of stimulus, is draining to introverts. So to give you a couple examples. An introvert, well, this is an example from my life. I can go to a party at a friend's house, good friend of mine, surrounded by all these other people who I also know, good friends, having a good time. But at some point in the evening, I'm going to go to the bathroom and I'm just going to sit in there for about 10 minutes and just do nothing. Might check my phone or something, play games, or just kind of check emails or whatever. But for at least 10, 15 minutes, I just need to be away from people. If everybody's inside, I will go outside. And I'll come up with an excuse just to kind of walk around in the backyard or something. Because even though I'm around all these people that I like and I know them and I feel secure and I feel safe, this is not like an awkward party where I don't know anybody. But even though this is a sort of perfect social situation, if you will, it's still just draining. And I just need to get away from people and just go do something else and just be quiet for a while. I will probably be the first person to leave as well, too. Just because after a while, I'll just kind of be done. On the weekends, like I see clients all through the week, Monday through Thursday, and then on Fridays I might be at networking events or doing other stuff, meeting other folks. On the weekends, I tend not to do anything. I will stay home. I've had, to me, a great weekend is to stay home by myself, doing nothing, not talking to anyone, and I'm fine. I did a vision quest, part of my survival skills training, where I spent, I think it was 4 days and 4 nights out in the woods by myself with nothing to do. That was part of the vision quest, was to really let your mind just kind of quiet down. And I loved it. 4 days and 4 nights with nobody around, no one to talk to, and I don't have to be anywhere, I don't have to do anything. That was awesome. Now, an extrovert probably couldn't finish. Actually, a true extrovert wouldn't even sign up for it. The idea of just being out in the woods alone with no one to talk to, why would you do that? Who would hate that? And extroverts love being around people. An extrovert, for instance, if they're sitting at home watching TV, they're usually the ones that are texting everybody all the time because they don't really want to be alone. And they might be texting nothing. Might be, hey, what's going on? What are you doing? I'm watching a show. Oh, it's okay, I guess, Well, what do you got going on? Oh, dude, just making passing commentary because they need that social connection. Being alone without any social connection freaks them out. Just as dropping an introvert into a huge party where they don't know anybody and they're expected to talk to people for hours on end. And an extrovert, the idea of being alone for hours on end just freaks them out. And the main reason why I want to discuss this is because there's nothing wrong with these two states of being. For a long time with introverts, we've thought of introverts as somehow like broken, damaged. They're depressed. They're lonely. They're misanthropes. They hate people. They're misunderstood. They have social anxiety. That's the differences. Introversion is not the same thing as social anxiety. You can be an extrovert and have social anxiety. You can want to be around people, but for whatever reason, being around people scares you. Maybe it was the way you were raised. Maybe you had a lot of bad interactions. These sort of things. And so an extrovert can want to be around people, but then be afraid of it because they have panic attacks or performance anxiety or whatever. An introvert who also has social anxiety is pretty sad because they don't crave social contact, and at the same time, when they do want social contact, they really don't know how to get it. And so in that sense, introverts are fairly lonely people because though they don't need much social interaction, they're still not even getting what little they need because their own social anxiety is withholding them. Introverts are not depressed, but then again, depressed people will look like introverts. A depressed person may not want to go out. They may not want to socialize. They may not do very many things. They may not want to connect with a lot of people. But that's not because they're introverts. It's because their depression is telling them there's no point, why bother, nobody's going to like me anyway, I won't meet anyone new, whatever it is, their depression is telling them that there's no point to this, and so they lack the motivation to go out. Whereas an introvert is really choosing to stay home. Like when I stay home on the weekends and out and do anything, that's totally my choice because I just need to decompress after being around people, all week long. So that's kind of the difference between an introvert and folks with different kind of mental illnesses. And like I said, these can't really be changed, but you do need to know them about yourself. Again, I like to bring it back to survival situations. If you're an introvert and you are lost in the woods by yourself, you'll probably be okay because you kind of like being by yourself. You might still miss people. You might still wish, I wish someone would come and save me, or maybe even wished I had a partner just to help me build the shelter or something else like that. But you're probably not going to go stir crazy like an extrovert will. An extrovert alone out in the woods is going to struggle. I think of the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks, the one with the volleyball. That was part of what he had to do. You kind of got the impression that he was this extroverted kind of guy. He was always talking to people. He was surrounded by people. He was chatting with the flight crew just before it went down, that sort of thing. And then he crashed on this island by himself. So here's this extrovert who really needs to be around a lot of people, and he's stuck on an island by himself. So what does he do? He makes a friend in the form of a volleyball, and he talks to it. And he kind of goes a little crazy after a while. Hopefully, if you're lost out in the woods, it won't be for 3 years or however long it was he was supposed to be stuck on that island. But that does mean that an extrovert lost in the woods by themselves will have certain challenges that an introvert is not going to have. Flip side, what if you're on a boat that crashes on an island and there's a large group of people and you're an introvert and now you're stuck with all these people and you can't necessarily just leave. You're on an island. You got nowhere else to go. One of the things that you'll have to do is to find a way to be alone at least for a little while. An example for me was like when I did my survival trip. It was me and I believe 4 other guys. We did 4 days and 4 nights on a survival trip. We were just out. We took like a knife and a water bottle, and we just had to kind of make a go of it on our own. One of the guys was an extreme extrovert. And I mean, like, he started talking the moment he woke up. And that was kind of rough for me because we're all, kind of camped together. We're all kind of working together to find food, build shelters, get fires going, explore the area, all the things you would do on a survival trip to test your skills. And he kind of never shut up. Like I said, if he was awake, he was talking. And so what I did was I had a sharp stick, and I would just, every morning when I got up, I would just kind of go off by myself and wander the trails with the excuse that I'm hunting for snakes for food. I was actually hunting for snakes for food, but it was this thing that I could do by myself. I was still contributing to the group, but also meeting my needs of just kind of having alone time and being quiet and that sort of thing. So that's one thing. If you're an extrovert and you're on that same boat, you're probably going to be pretty fine. You're going to have all of these people to talk to, almost this captive audience of people to work with. And extroverts are also needed in those situations because the extrovert is the one that's going to hopefully bind the social group together by talking to people, getting people engaged, being friendly with folks, learning about different people's needs and personalities and where they're at. And so both sets, introverts and extroverts, have a role in a survival situation, but you need to know what your preference is. That's why I encourage folks to take the personality test, because you need to know more about yourself to know how can you interact with the group and how can you best serve the group and serve yourself by doing what fits your own personality. If you're an introvert and you know you're an introvert, don't try and be an extrovert because you'll drive yourself nuts and eventually you'll drive everybody else nuts. If you're the introvert, be the guy who volunteers to go off hunting for snakes or collecting wild edibles or just scouting around or exploring the area. Allow yourself to just go out and be alone for a little while and then bring that back to the group, and you're still serving the group while still going off and doing your own thing. If you're an extrovert and you know you're an extrovert, be the guy who hangs out in the camp and maybe you learn some skills to do around the camp so you can be around a lot more people. Maybe you're cooking the things that people are bringing back, or you're trying to make make shelters a little better, or tending to the sick or the injured, that sort of thing. But if you're an extrovert and you like people, be with the people. If you're an introvert and you like being alone, go be alone. Trying to force yourself to be something that you're not is going to be a detriment in the long run to the group. I still think that that's probably how our ancestors lived as well. That the introverts were probably the people who went on long hunting trips because they just kind of wanted to be off by themselves and get away from the village. They were probably the explorers, the people who just kind of didn't want to be that tied to the village. Whereas the extroverts were the one who probably stayed there and told stories and sang songs and basically built the cultural aspects of the society. Whereas the introverts probably went off and built the sort of infrastructure of the society. But anyway, I will put the description I'll put all the links to these sort of things in the description. I encourage you to really explore a lot of these things. Like I said in my personality video, this is tool number 1 of your survival situation. And the more you can learn about yourself, the more you can learn about your own personality and how you work, then the more effective you can be in those situations. And then more effective you can be to your community or the other people that you're surviving with or whatever. So definitely take some time to explore this about yourself. But anyway, that's all I have for this week, and I will see you later. Bye.